Don't look at me like that. I know exactly what I look like right now. I look like a complete idiot who just traded his soul for a piece of shiny metal, and honestly, that's because I did. But if you were in my shoes exactly 7 days ago, you would have done the exact same thing. I was sitting right where you are now, listening to all those hyper-intelligent financial gurus on YouTube telling me that buying this was the single most sophisticated financial move a person could make in their entire life. I believed them. I felt like a financial prophet. I went to the bank, wiped out my checking account, and drained every single penny of my $3,000 life savings to buy this 1-ounce bar of pure physical gold. I thought I was protecting myself from inflation. I thought I was sticking it to the Federal Reserve. But right now, my ancient Honda Civic is sitting on the side of the highway with a completely fried alternator, my landlord is literally pounding on my front door demanding the rent, and I am standing here holding a block of pure, unadulterated 24-karat wealth, but I don't even have $5 in cash to buy a single burrito for dinner. I tried biting it earlier just to see if it felt real, and I almost chipped my front tooth. This metal doesn't taste like freedom. It tastes like copper, dirt, and profound regret. Let me take you back 3 months ago, to the exact moment my brain officially contracted a severe case of financial paranoia. It was a Monday evening, right after I finished a grueling 12-hour shift at my dead-end job. I walked into Trader Joe's to get a basic week's worth of groceries, and by the time the cashier rang me up, my $100 bill was completely gone and I only had 3 small bags of food to show for it. It felt like my money was literally evaporating in midair. My rent was creeping up, my car insurance premium was skyrocketing, and the only numbers on my screen that remained completely frozen in time were the numbers on my paycheck. I went home, slumped onto my secondhand couch, and opened up my phone only to be hit by an absolute tidal wave of doom and gloom financial content. You know exactly the type of videos I'm talking about. There were these incredibly slick 30-something-year-old self-made millionaires standing in front of rented Lamborghinis, screaming at the camera with graphics showing the US dollar crashing into a bottomless abyss. One guy, who looked intensely authoritative, literally dumped a massive duffel bag filled with $185,000 worth of gold bullion right onto his oak desk. He stared directly into my soul and said that the US dollar has lost 98% of its purchasing power since the year 1913 because the government won't stop printing paper money out of thin air. He told me that fiat currency is an absolute scam, that every paper currency in human history has ultimately trended towards its intrinsic value of 0, and that if I didn't convert my fragile cash into hard physical gold immediately, I was committing financial suicide. When you are young, broke, and terrified about your future, that kind of rhetoric doesn't just sound smart, it sounds like an absolute lifeline. A massive wave of financial FOMO hit my brain. I didn't have $185,000 like the guy in the video, obviously, but I did have exactly $3,000 sitting in a basic Wells Fargo savings account. That was my ultimate safety net, the money I scraped together by skipping meals, working double shifts, and driving a car that sounds like a lawnmower full of loose rocks. I convinced myself that if the entire global financial system was truly on the verge of total collapse, I needed to go all in on gold to protect my future. I spent the next 48 hours memorizing economic theories like a university student cramming for a final exam. I became an absolute expert on the 3 macroeconomic drivers of gold. First, the global central banks are quietly buying up historical amounts of gold to de-dollarize their reserves. Second, global geopolitics are a total mess, with wars and political tensions escalating everywhere. Third, hyperinflation is actively eating away at the purchasing power of the middle class. The logic felt completely airtight. I felt so much smarter than all my friends who were losing their shirts on meme coins or spending their paychecks on limited edition sneakers. I was an investor now. I was a man of culture. I refused to buy paper gold or some digital gold ETF on a trading app because all the internet survivalists told me that if you can't physically hold it in your hand, you don't actually own it. So I went down to a highly reputable precious metals dealer in the city center. I pushed my entire $3,000 stack of paper cash through the bulletproof window. The dealer handed me a single tiny 1-ounce bar of gold. It was smaller than a pack of cards, smaller than a standard smartphone, practically the size of a box of matches. But it had all the beautiful official stamps on it, the exact weight, the 99.99% purity certification, the official refinery logo, and a unique serial number. The dealer explained to me that when you buy smaller fractional bars like a 1-ounce piece, you have to pay a much higher premium over the electronic spot price compared to the massive kilobars that central banks buy. But he assured me it was totally worth it, because smaller bars have incredible liquidity, meaning it would be so much easier for me to sell it off to ordinary folks when the economy finally collapsed. I nodded my head like a total genius, thinking that paying an extra $100 for peace of mind was a brilliant trade. I took my tiny prize, wrapped it carefully in an old, threadbare athletic sock with a hole in the toe, and drove back to my apartment. Since I obviously couldn't afford to pay hundreds of dollars a year to rent a high-security, 24/7 monitored vault at a private Swiss depository like the millionaires on YouTube, I had to implement a genius home storage strategy. I hid the smelly sock containing my $3,000 fortune under a massive pile of dirty laundry at the very bottom of my closet. I figured even the most seasoned cat burglar would get knocked unconscious by the odor before they ever found my treasure. Then, just to be incredibly safe, I grabbed a piece of paper and drew a highly detailed treasure map using complex symbols and riddles, thinking that if anything ever happened to me, my family could decode it and inherit my wealth. I went to bed that night feeling like a financial mastermind. But that was also the exact night I developed a severe, debilitating case of asset paranoia. For the first time in my life, every single ambient noise in my apartment complex sounded like a highly coordinated home invasion. Every time the floorboards creaked, every time the neighbor's cat jumped on the balcony, every time a car drove past with a loud exhaust, my heart would violently hammer against my ribs. I woke up 3 separate times that night just to shove my hand into the dirty laundry pile and make sure the hard metal block was still there. Gold didn't bring me an ounce of peace, it just brought me chronic insomnia. But here's the thing about real life. It doesn't care about your macroeconomic charts or your theoretical internet doomsday scenarios. The universe doesn't wait for the US dollar to collapse to zero before it decides to ruin your week. It hits you on a random Monday morning while you're trying to get to work. I was driving down the interstate, mentally calculating how much money I was making that hour, when suddenly a massive cloud of thick black smoke started pouring out from underneath the hood of my Civic. The engine made a horrible metal clanging noise and completely died. I had to pay $100 just to get a tow truck to drag my broken piece of junk to the nearest repair shop. The mechanic looked at me with an expression of pure pity, tapped his wrench against my alternator, and told me the entire charging system and the air conditioning compressor were completely melted. He said the total cost for parts and labor was $1,200, cash or credit right now, or he wouldn't even touch the car. Before I could even process that information, my phone vibrated in my pocket. It was an automated email from my corporate landlord. Due to market adjustments and rising property taxes, my monthly rent was being hiked by an additional $300 effective immediately. And if the balance wasn't paid in full within 3 days, an eviction notice would be posted on my front door. My heart dropped directly into my stomach. I opened my banking app with trembling fingers to check my balance. The screen read $14.15. I was in a state of absolute, unmitigated terror. I needed exactly $1,500 by the end of the week, where I was going to lose my transportation to work, lose my income, and literally be sleeping on a park bench by Friday night. I sprinted back to my apartment like a maniac, ripped open my bedroom door, and dove headfirst into my closet. I started throwing t-shirts, jeans, and hoodies wildly over my shoulder, digging like a frantic dog trying to find a bone. I reached the bottom corner where the dirty laundry pile was supposed to be. The corner was completely empty. The sock was gone. I let out a scream that probably terrified everyone in the building. Right at that moment, my roommate walked past the doorway holding a glass of water, looking completely casual.
He looked at me and said that my mom had stopped by earlier in the morning while I was at work, noticed how incredibly messy my room was, and decided to do a massive favor by gathering up all the old trash bags, the dirty clothes, and the old socks and throwing them directly into the apartment complex's main commercial dumpster at 6 in the morning. My face went completely pale, and my eyes felt like they were going to pop out of my skull. I pulled out my genius treasure map from underneath my pillow, desperate to see if I had written down an alternative location. But because I had drawn the symbols in a state of total panic 3 weeks ago, my handwriting looked like a chaotic series of chicken scratches. I couldn't even read my own code. I crumpled up the map, threw it on the floor, and ran out to the parking lot like a bullet. I spent the next 3 hours of my life completely submerged inside a disgusting, giant metal dumpster covered in old Chinese takeout containers, rotten milk cartons, and used coffee grounds, tearing open black trash bags in absolute humiliation while my neighbors stared at me like I was a homeless drug addict. When my fingers finally clamped around that heavy metal bar inside the smelly sock, I wept tears of pure joy. I didn't care that I smelled like a landfill. I just thought to myself that my saving grace was finally here, and that I could instantly take this to a shop and walk out with $2,300 of pure cash based on the current market price I saw on Google Finance. I ran straight into the largest precious metals store in the financial district, smelling like garbage, and slammed my gold bar onto the counter, gasping for breath, telling the owner I needed to liquidate it immediately. The store owner was a heavy-set guy wearing a giant gold chain and a pair of tinted glasses. He picked up my bar with a pair of tweezers, examined it under a magnifying glass, and then looked at me with absolute indifference. He asked me if I had the original purchase invoice, a government-issued photo ID that matched the bill of sale, and told me that because of strict Internal Revenue Service regulations regarding precious metal transactions and anti-money laundering laws, we had to fill out a mountain of complex federal paperwork. He told me that the spot price I was looking at on my phone was for large-scale institutional paper contracts on the futures market, not for a random kid walking in off the street with a single ounce of physical metal. He looked at my desperate expression, shrugged his shoulders, and told me that if I didn't like the price, I could walk out the door and try to find another shop that would take a week to clear a check while my landlord evicted me. I stood there on the street corner, clutching that step of cash, completely broken. I realized that all the beautiful talk about the high liquidity of physical gold was an absolute fairy tale designed for people who don't actually need the cash to survive. I had to take a massive $500 loss on the value of the asset, plus the premium I paid up front just to get the cash to save myself from homelessness. I paid the mechanic, I paid the landlord, and I went back to my room with $14 left, completely stripped of my illusions. That night, the apartment was completely silent. The only sound was the scraping of my fork against a bowl of 99-cent instant ramen. I sat on the floor in the dark, looking at the car repair receipt and the tiny stack of singles left on my table. I couldn't sleep, but it wasn't because I was afraid of thieves anymore. It was because the cold, hard, mathematical reality of my stupidity was finally sinking into my brain. I had just handed a local coin shop $500 of my hard-earned money in a matter of minutes, just for the privilege of converting my own savings back into usable currency. I opened up my laptop and pulled up that original YouTube video of the millionaire. The triumphant cinematic music was still playing, and the guy still looked incredibly handsome and confident. But this time, I didn't close the tab early. I sat there and watched the video all the way to the very end, past the 15-minute mark, all the way to the 18-minute mark.
And right there, in the final 45 seconds of a 20-minute video, the millionaire smiled subtly at the camera, leaned in, and dropped a tiny disclaimer. He said that because gold does not produce any active cash flow, young investors should always remember to only keep between 5 and 15% of their total net worth in physical metals, while keeping the remaining 85% of their wealth safely compounding in cash-flowing real estate and broad market equity index funds. I sat there completely frozen. 5%.
5% of a guy who has a $3 million net worth is $150,000. Wealthy people buy gold because their biggest problem is that they already have a mountain of cash and they need a dead, unreactive asset to act as a secure vault so that inflation doesn't slowly nibble away at their millions over a 30-year time horizon. They buy gold to preserve wealth they already have. But me? I had $3,000. That wasn't wealth that needed preservation. That was survival capital. That was my emergency shield against the absolute volatility of everyday life. Then I opened up my second banking app, the one for my credit card, and I stared at the numbers on the screen. I was carrying a $5,000 balance on that card from my college days, and the annual percentage rate was a staggering 24%. I had spent the last 3 months feeling like Warren Buffett because I saw a chart showing that gold had increased in value by 15% over the last 12 months. I thought I was making a genius investment, but my brain completely ignored the basic elementary school math of the situation. While my dead piece of metal was sitting under a pile of dirty clothes, praying for a 15% gain that wasn't even guaranteed, my credit card debt was actively compounding against me at a guaranteed rate of 24% every single year. Every single month that I chose to hold on to that physical gold bar so I could feel like a rich investor was a month where I was willingly handing the bank a net negative 9% return on my life. I was holding gold just to subsidize my own financial bleeding. I was holding an asset that produced absolutely zero cash flow, zero dividends, and zero utility, all for the sake of a psychological delusion of safety that the internet had sold to me. I put down my bowl of ramen, stood up, and decided right then and there that I was done playing the financial game according to the rules of people who are already rich. If you are young, broke, and trying to build a life from absolute scratch, you cannot afford to lock your money away in a metal box that does nothing but look pretty. I took what was left of my financial dignity and I built a realistic 3-step financial system designed specifically for people who are tired of living paycheck to paycheck. Step 1 was to build a real emergency fund with absolute instant liquidity. I didn't put it in a sock. I didn't put it in a checking account that pays 0% interest. I opened a high-yield savings account with an online bank that offered a 4.5% annual return. I put $2,000 in there, and that money is my ultimate shield. If my car breaks down tomorrow, if my laptop dies, if my landlord throws a tantrum, I don't have to walk into a pawn shop and beg for mercy. I open my phone, hit transfer, and the cash is in my checking account in 3 seconds flat, without a single penny of transaction fees. Cash is king when you are trying to find your footing. Step 2 was to launch a relentless, scorched earth campaign against my high-interest debt. I stopped buying into the fantasy of complex investments and realized that paying off a 24% credit card bill is the exact mathematical equivalent of securing a guaranteed, risk-free 24% return on my money. No index fund, no cryptocurrency, and certainly no gold bar on earth can ever promise you a guaranteed 24% return. Every extra dollar I made from working overtime went straight into crushing that debt until the monster was completely dead. Step 3 was to pivot every single dollar of my remaining capital into assets that actually produce active cash flow, and more importantly, into my own earning capacity. Instead of sitting around staring at a gold chart, praying for global instability so my metal bar would go up in value, I invested in books, online courses, and certifications to increase my value in the marketplace. I raised my skill set so I could stop working for $15 an hour and start making $40 an hour. Increasing your active income is the single greatest weapon you have against inflation, not buying a metal brick and hiding it in your closet. Gold isn't inherently evil. It has a beautiful, thousands of years old history of staying power. But gold is a massive, heavy suit of iron armor. It's fantastic for a wealthy king who is standing still trying to defend his castle from invaders. But if you are 22 years old and you are running a marathon just to keep up with rent, utility bills, and student loans, a heavy suit of iron armor in your backpack is just going to drag you down to the bottom of the ocean. You don't need armor right now. You need a pair of incredibly fast running shoes, which means you need a strong, active cash flow and a liquid cash safety net. Don't let the multi-million-dollar titles on your screen trick you into sacrificing your survival capital for a false sense of security. If you want to see the exact blueprint of how I set up my high-yield savings account so the banks are forced to pay me interest every month instead of the other way around, click on the video that is appearing on your screen right now. I'll see you over there. Keep your head cool and keep your wallet warm.